For right now, it's the Crimson and the Cream hitting the Crimson and the Cream in practice, but that's a step in the right direction in regards to us who want to see football on the field, and that's less than 4 weeks away. Talking Oklahoma, of course, right here at the voice of college football, Boomer Sooners. So please lock it in for our Oklahoma show, as we typically do each and every Friday at 11:30 a.m. Central Time. Jason Ray, last word on college football's here, of course, because he's the guy that makes it all work. And I've got my Oklahoma colors on today.
I see that. You're joining the club.
We're leaning maybe in that direction. Maybe you're pulling me in. I don't know.
Yeah. No,
good to have you, Jason, as always. Jason provided us with two live stream recruiting updates this week in Q&A sessions, so please check those out if you haven't already. Otherwise, leave those comments and questions in the live chat. We're going to get to the last position group on a defense. That would be the secondary today. But I think you've got some recruiting targets that you're looking at right now.
Yeah. So just kind of on the heels of that party at the Palace that Oklahoma had last weekend, we'd mentioned in the recruiting update that you had mentioned, Colton Vasek has committed to Oklahoma on Monday. And so I think the thing about that is really interesting is something that Oklahoma hasn't been able to do. So this kid is a Texas legacy. His mom and dad have went to the University of Texas. He goes to Austin Westlake, which is just right on the back door of the University of Texas. And he was a guy that Oklahoma was in on, but Oklahoma looked to be on the outside looking in before this visit last weekend, and then went on the visit and committed 2 days later. So I think, I think it's just telling how good the staff has been thus far early on from a recruiting standpoint. So, and just some of the other guys I'd mentioned, Oklahoma there's 3 commitment dates, so to speak, within the month of August. One is kind of unconfirmed, but it's going to happen at some point in August. So the 2, Jacoby Johnson, 4-star athlete out of the state of Oklahoma, Mustang, Oklahoma, has set his commitment date for August 13th. So a week from tomorrow. I still like everything you hear from that. He was at the recruiting week, the recruiting party this weekend. Everything went really, really well with him. I still think Oklahoma is firmly entrenched in the driver's seat for him. Makari Vickers there was some rumors that he might be moving his commitment date up a little bit. Those have since been made false by Makari himself. So he's still making his announcement on August 26th. There as a high school there in Tallahassee, Florida. So again, this is another kid that Oklahoma is going and getting just outside. Certainly, Florida State's a little bit down comparatively to where they have been in the past, but again, in another school's backyard, going and getting him. So and Florida State's really not in the mix. It's Oklahoma and Alabama. Oklahoma has increasingly made just an incredible imprint on Makari and just kind of where he wants to be. I would say really, really good. Probably a few weeks ago, I would say this was more of a 50-50, maybe a slight lean towards Oklahoma. I would probably say 90% right now. Oklahoma, tons of predictions in Silver Ball are crystal balls going to Oklahoma. Wide receiver perspective, Anthony Evans he's the guy that I've heard August, not necessarily a date in August, but I don't know exactly, when that will be. And then there's a few others that there's not necessarily a date, but obviously to keep your eye on if you're Oklahoma fans. And I think right here, Peyton Bowen is one. I think he's a guy that's committed to Notre Dame right now. Oklahoma and A&M are in the mix. I think the least likely scenario of the 3 is him to stay committed to Notre Dame. I think it's probably, from everything I've heard, it's an OU and A&M battle. And he has a younger brother, Eli Bowen, who Oklahoma and A&M are also recruiting. He's a 2024 kid or 25, one of the two. But both Oklahoma and A&M are recruiting him. And so I think I talked about this a lot. He's a guy that's been to Norman 8 or 9 times. So he's been to Norman a significantly more amount of times than he has been at A&M. But I think what's happening now, as you would expect to a certain degree, I think he really, really likes Oklahoma. I think his parents like Oklahoma. But A&M's getting involved now, and when A&M is getting involved in a recruiting battle, there's tons of NIL money being thrown. So I don't know, I don't know if that's going to be. At this point, it's probably 50-50 either way. But I do think he's going to make a decision here pretty soon. All signs point to indicate he really wants to have this behind him and focus on his senior year by when school starts, or certainly if by by their first game from a high school perspective. So I wouldn't expect this to last more than another couple of weeks. But again, I think there's probably a little bit more that he likes from the Oklahoma staff. But again, for these kids, if you've got another place and they're throwing, and I'm not saying this is what's being thrown, but if they're throwing, 6 figures, 7 figures at you, it's hard to say no. So he's one of those guys that I think we'll find out here pretty soon. Ryan Yates is another kid that's committed to LSU. I think there's probably a really good chance that he lands at Oklahoma. Just hasn't pulled the trigger just yet. He was very, very impressed. I think there's unconfirmed 5 to 6 what I would call silent commitments out of that weekend. And so I think signs indicate that perhaps he might be one of them as well. And then a couple of other guys that are down the line in terms of commitment dates, but aren't maybe not necessarily signing day, but aren't going to happen within the next couple of months. So Jordan Raynaud, 4-star defensive lineman, again between Oklahoma and Alabama. Oklahoma has made significant headway in this battle. It looked like maybe it was a slight lean towards Alabama. I think from things that I've heard, it's pretty solid Oklahoma right now. So if Oklahoma continues that relationship and it builds really well, then I think what you're looking at is him coming to Oklahoma, which I think is just big in the general scheme of things. So if those two things were to happen with Jordan Raynaud and Makari Vickers, that's 2 head-to-head battles, Oklahoma against Alabama, that Oklahoma's won. I mean, Alabama's not hurting. I mean, they've jumped all the way up to the number 1 recruiting class in the country, right? They've got a couple of 5-stars last week, but at the same time, when you're going head-to-head on some of these battles and you're able to win a couple of them, I mean, that's an incredible sign on the defensive side of the ball, especially. And then, obviously the guy that a lot of people like to talk about was DJ Hicks. I think, and we talked about this before the weekend, I think it was really Oklahoma and A&M are the 2 biggest players here. There's some other teams that are in the mix, but I think Oklahoma and A&M lead. And I said I would probably give Oklahoma a very slight lead before this weekend. Now I think it's fairly sizable. Todd Bates and Brent Venables have had a long-standing relationship with DJ and his family going back to when they were at Clemson. They were recruiting him. So I think the culture and I think the relationship is very advanced with Hicks and Oklahoma. So that's the one. Like I said, it's still going to be in the long run. However, I have heard that there's a chance that he may not be necessarily a signing day commit announcement. He could be a kid that moves his commitment date up a little bit. And the reason I say that is I think him and the family are starting to get a little bit tiresome of the recruiting process and all that kind of goes along with that. Mark, I think when he trimmed his list down to 5 or 6, I think his thoughts was, and the family's thought was, okay, I trimmed these down, and then maybe there's not as many phone calls and text and things like that. But they said it's been questionably more. since that. So I think it's taking a toll, and as you would expect with a kid, as good as that number one defensive lineman in the country. Certainly he's had coaches and and people recruiting him for the last 4 or 5 years, obviously. So at least the last 3 or 4, and so I think with him, he's another guy that you like where you're at if that relationship continues to go the way it goes, and if it is, this is probably the best defensive commitment that Oklahoma has gotten since Gerald McCoy. Maybe maybe Tommy Harris, but both of those are. But when you look at Gerald McCoy, 5-star kid, top 5 NFL draft pick. I mean that's not too bad. And I think so with him. And then the other one that I'll mention is Malachi Coleman. He is a 4-star athlete, probably more of a wide receiver / tight end. 6'5", 185. And this one's really interesting. Again, he's a kid that is right in Nebraska's backyard, Lincoln, Nebraska kid. He's a kid that's adopted, and both of his parents are incredibly big Nebraska supporters. And so, but again, it kind of begs the question: okay, if he's right in Nebraska's backyard, but he's not committed yet. He's got several crystal balls to Nebraska, but he's not committed yet. However, he has, over the last couple of weeks, he has been very, very pro Oklahoma, like sharing a lot of these commitment tweets and asking, is this the place that he should go? And so Oklahoma was finally able to actually get an official visit. I think it'll probably be in the September timeframe, early on, during one of the games early in September. So he's a guy that's going to make his announcement, I believe, mid-October. He's already set that announcement date at some point in the October timeframe. So he's a guy that Oklahoma's making tons of headway on. And if Oklahoma was able to pull him out of Nebraska's backyard, I mean, maybe not the same as Texas, but still, Lincoln, Nebraska kid, even though Nebraska is not what they have been in the past, you still think that he's, that they would have that area locked down, so to speak. So, I mean, just getting an official visit, I think is big for Oklahoma. But there's about 7 or 8 kids that I've mentioned here, and Oklahoma has 19 signed already to the class, and everything that I've heard, they're probably in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 guys that they're going to take. They don't necessarily want to rely on the transfer portal as much, or certainly not to the degree that they did this year. So, yeah, a lot of good things. Oklahoma's still at number 6 overall. I think when you forecast this forward, I think this has the opportunity, if they get some of these kids, especially Hicks, to be a top 3 or 4 class. But I think certainly no less than top 10 when's all said and done.
Looking in from the outside on the Malachi Coleman situation, and of course, each recruit, each family has a different set of priorities, but they generally fall in the same categories. Just in what order depends on the person and the situation. NFL development, winning, relationships built with the coaching staff, location, and a few other things. If I'm Malachi Coleman, and certainly it seems as though he has great respect for his parents and their wishes and their fandom to Nebraska and so forth. But you would think there would, for me, be a greater likelihood to watch this season, to let the season play out and see if winning means anything, then do I want to commit myself and now sign with a program that may be in the running to barely get to bowl games while I'm there, versus I can play for college football playoff appearances? And, it just, Oklahoma, even though there's a new head coach and it's a different program in a sense under Brent Venables, there's certainly more proven track record with the program, of course. And then also just, it appears as though things are going to continue to run smoothly toward winning conference championships, of course, the transition to the SEC, and just being a top-level program versus the uncertainty of whether Scott Frost is going to be there, number one. Number two, is Nebraska going to be able to contend ever in the Big Ten? And I would want to see the season play out before I committed and signed with Nebraska myself. Well, of course, he's not going to be able to sign until December, right. But I think the season is very much in play for Nebraska more so than other teams in his decision.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's probably why he has not committed to Nebraska. One, I think number two, it's why he's waiting until October. I mean, I don't know how much the head-to-head is actually going to play into the decision. On September 17th, I believe. But yeah, no, I think there's a certain degree of uncertainty right there, right, for all the reasons that you mentioned, but and also for the what does that trajectory look like? And certainly wouldn't be surprised to see if he doesn't get the warm fuzzies that he's looking for from Nebraska, even if he pulls his decision back a little bit, just to see how that continues to kind of go through the month of December, or month of November at least. So, but no, I think you're absolutely right, Mark. I think that has the uncertainty of Nebraska and all of the momentum that Oklahoma, this program, has had since January. I think that plays into this decision as well. And so, I think that'll be good to see. And I think it's kind of off topic here, but I just wanted to mention that this while we're talking about recruiting. I think Venables has gotten a little bit of heat in the media over the last couple of weeks around his comment that he made around, hey, I don't want any of these commitments to any of these guys to commit until they know that this is where they want to be and this is what commitment looks like. And so I think he's gotten a little bit of heat because of the fact that he's going out and trying to flip some of these kids. And so I think and when you look at it, if these other kids are willing to visit Oklahoma, willing to talk Oklahoma, they're not really committed anyways. But just as a couple of examples, Ashton Kozart is a guy that had been committed to Oklahoma as a wide receiver for some time. He went and took another visit. Oklahoma dropped him immediately. They rescinded the offer, and they said, okay, if that's what you want to do, then that's fine. But we're not. And then there's been a couple of other kids that have done the same thing. So, I mean, he's staying true to his word as far as that goes, and there's not a lot of teams that have that same mentality. So, like I said, it seems to be working, fairly well right now from a recruiting circle. But again, I think this season, just from a recruiting perspective, they've been able to gather all this momentum without playing a single game. So, how, particularly on the defensive side, how this defense plays is going to be a big big indicator at how high this recruiting can go, at least for the 2023 cycle.
So we know with NIL that inducements are not allowed. I'm not going to accuse anyone of breaking the guidelines and the rules, but we know that we have a pretty good idea that they're not being enforced. We don't know if something's going to break at some point, if there's going to be some type of a infraction or investigation or anything like that. Who knows? But as of right now, nobody's been caught, investigated, nothing like that. There have been accusations thrown all over the place by coaches and others. So, but we do know that every program, especially at the status of Oklahoma, does have NIL money available for the athletes and a collective or collectives that are available. I just don't know how much they're able to be specific about that. If they are following the guidelines and the rules, how much they are allowed to communicate to the athlete. Certainly Nick Saban came out a few weeks ago and said that their current roster is earning about $3 million in NIL money. So even if there's not inducement there, certainly I would think that that an athlete's going to be pretty assured that he's going to be taken care of, and there are going to be opportunities, I should state it that way, at an Oklahoma. And then the further we get along in this process, I would think that the more that those, not that the numbers are going to be made public unless the individual players want them to be made public and announce them, because they shouldn't be and are not. They're not public knowledge. But the further we get along in this process, the more there's going to be substantial information that's going to be confirmed about, okay, at what level do these various programs operate, and what collectives do they have in line to what degree? And there's going to be some kind of better understanding 3-5 years from now about what is the status and tiers of NIL collectives for each program.
Yeah, I think, Mark, it's, to your point, I think it's going to be critical that and I think most people are supportive of the NIL initiative in general, right? I mean, I think a lot of people are very understanding of the time and sacrifice and everything that goes into a high level or any kind of FBS athlete from a collegiate football perspective. So I don't think there's ever any, maybe some, but there's very few opposition to NIL. But I think, to your point, where I struggle with it a little bit is right now it is, to a degree, it's free agency without a salary cap. And so, I mean, I think to your point about, if people are doing this illegally, and certainly there are. I mean, we know that, this has probably been happening for years and years and years, and now there's sort of a legal loophole around it. So, but, I don't, in the interest of having more of a fair playing field, I think the NCAA is going to have to, or someone from a legislative perspective is going to have to come out and say, okay, there is a cap as far as like this amount, because, there's some comments here. Oklahoma can't, if it's a true bidding war, if that's what it is, I mean, Oklahoma can't compete with like the likes of Texas and Texas A&M and maybe even Alabama and Georgia to a certain degree, right? And I'm just throwing teams out there that are even state, when you look at states that are the biggest, right, have more opportunity from an A&M perspective or from a Texas perspective. But but you do have different, I guess, edge cases, right? You do have, this is a team that has historically been more successful in Oklahoma versus Texas A&M, through the years. But then you look at Alabama, yes, they do a ton of NIL stuff, but they don't need to. I mean, they don't need to just drop their cash, so to speak, to entice kids to go play at Alabama. So yeah, I think it's very paramount at some point that there needs to be some sort of I don't know whether it's a salary cap, so to speak, or whether it's a because there's several different, to your point, different collectives, and I know that Oklahoma's doing a good job at having several different collectives. But I think probably the only way that you get right now that you get caught or that you are doing something against the rules is just having these athletes do nothing to get this money, right? I mean, I think they're supposed to do, several different things, whether it's, type of community service type of things, signing autographs or whatever it might be. So, but how do you, right now there's no safeguarding on that. I don't believe. So, I mean, they could say that they're doing this all day long. And are they really doing it? So, but yeah, I think, it's certainly an uneven playing field, not only at the top level, but just, when you look at some of these other programs that just won't be able to compete in this area, whether it comes to transfer portal, whether it comes to recruiting out of high school. And so it's obviously very much an unfair, uneven playing field. So, and you can tell, like, Texas A&M has gotten better under Jimbo, obviously, over the last couple of years. But to have, what did they have, 31, 33 commitments, the highest recruiting score ever in the history of, actually tabulating these rankings. I mean, there's something there, right? I mean, there's something there that's happening, and I mean, and Texas is up there too, but you can't necessarily pinpoint to NIL because they've traditionally had really good top 5 recruiting classes, even though you go all the way back to Mac Brown as well. So, yeah, I don't know more. I mean, I think at some point there's got to be some initiatives, whatever it is, to at least try to put some guardrails in place, so to speak, because it's kind of open free market right now.
So this is going to be the second recruiting class that is signed under NIL. And Texas A&M, without looking up the rankings, I would guess, I believe that their recruiting rankings under Jimbo Fisher have been somewhere around 7 to 10 in the nation. And of course, as you just outlined, they had the number 1 recruiting class in the history of college football. So the impact, and even though that seems reasonable that a team could jump from 7 or 8 to number 1 in the country, it's really not. It's been 3 or 4 or 5 teams that have been jamming that top 4 or 5. And as we've discussed in the past when explaining recruiting rankings, they start those slots. Each slot is not created equal, and that after you get past 5 or so, they start to drop off considerably. So jumping from 7 or 8 to 1 is an enormous. It's like jumping from 25 to 7.
Right.
So that's been the one school that's shown a huge impact. Otherwise, these recruiting rankings, based on what we saw last year and based on the way it's probably going to play out this year, seem to be like the teams that always recruit well and always sign the best players are still going to be there. It doesn't appear as though some wild card has just catapulted up the rankings. I know that the rankings at this stage of the season are always a bit disjointed and there's a few surprises here and there, but I don't expect that to last. So it doesn't seem to have had, it seems that the teams, the schools, the institutions that had the money to pour into facilities and recruiting and staff and all those things before are still the same schools that have all these opportunities in NIL that just supplement that. And the rich have just gotten richer or stayed rich, and the other schools have stayed in line with where they are. We're not seeing where somebody is catapulted out of nowhere to become some recruiting power, or Alabama or Ohio State or somebody has fallen off the map because they just don't have NIL resources. So that's at least my quick take through one cycle and a half a cycle of recruiting. And then the other thing concerning a salary cap, the only thing I'll say there, and I am no expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I just can't imagine that that's legal to institute a salary cap because this is outside money. So it'd be like limiting my ability to get advertising. The NFL is able to institute a salary cap because they're running a business, just like any business that looks at their employee staff and says we can only target budget 22% towards salaries or whatever the figure is, because we've got to run a business and our operating budget and all the other things we need to do take up all this other money. The NFL is the same way. So the players benefit as the cap expands based on the business expanding. If the business contracts, then the cap goes down and they make less money. So it's all tied to the business, whereas this is outside money that's, in a sense, unlimited, not technically, but almost unlimited. So I don't know how a salary cap would be instituted.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, and I think as this conversation probably delves into conference realignment to a certain degree. When I say that, I mean there's a group of 5 teams that aren't going to be able to compete. There's even some FBS level teams I'm sorry, Power 5 level teams that aren't going to be able to compete at that same level. So you look at, what is going on, in terms of the Big Ten and the SEC. And so I wouldn't be surprised in a few years if we see a breakaway from the NCAA, from, some of those Power 5 teams, and just because of what NIL has been able to do. I mean, because to your point about the salary cap, you open that, um, Pandora's box, so to speak, and it's hard to police it. It's hard to kind of manage it. To your point about it's one thing if it's one thing if it was a situation where the organizations themselves, the schools, were paying these players, right? Like in an NFL type of situation, but you've got outside money, and I think ultimately it's like donations, right? Like people that donate to the athletic program, like if you're not able to raise enough money, then you just aren't. But if no one puts a cap on the amount of money that you're able to donate to a university. So I think same situation here. So it'll just be really interesting to see how this evolves over the coming years. I think we like to see parity, in the game, but we've not really seen it at the level that I think many of us like to see it. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be, like I said, it'll be very fascinating to see how that kind of comes into play with not only that, but the conference realignment, playoff expansion, and things like that as kind of as a whole.
We have a ton of content available for you here at the Voice of College Football, Oklahoma. So please dive in. Jason provided 2 recruiting updates this week, Q&As with all of you. So if you missed the live shows there, please check out those videos. And I sat down with Parker Thune about a week ago, and those segments are available, as well as if you missed part of the show here, you can always catch, of course, the replay. The entirety of the replay is available, but also we repurpose those segments as well into topics. All right. And I'm keeping an eye on the live chat for your comments and questions to keep us going here on our Oklahoma show. We're looking at the secondary this week. And in the meantime, we will look up the past poll results. So Jason has run down the offense and the defense over the past number of weeks, starting at quarterback. So all the positions on offense are available for you to check out. And we've run through the defense the past few weeks, D-line and linebacker. Now we're going to look at the secondary. So Jason, what do you think about the DBs for OU in 22?
Yeah, so I think, Mark, I think over the years, this is the area of the defense that has probably been the most inconsistent and the most, I think, maligned, and I think mostly for good reason, right? You've seen, from time to time, you've seen solid play, and then you've seen just very inconsistent play where it's not championship level, it's not where it needs to be. So I think this is this secondary and this defensive back field for Oklahoma, I think is probably the deepest that it's been, in quite some time. And so I think a lot of these kids have really bought in to the guys that are coaching them, right? So I think has been concern with Alex Grinch and Roy Manning's coaching style from previous years. I know there was some concern that how just the struggle of how vanilla their coverages were on the back end, struggling with just from a perspective of, and this has been an epidemic at Oklahoma over the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years, and just development in the secondary. There would see flashes, but then you would see some of these kids just maybe kind of getting worse as the as the season and the years go by. So I think, Brandon Hall coming in as the safety coach. You've got Jay Valai working with the defensive backs as well. And so, Valai has tons of, pedigree, so to speak, on his resume with being in Alabama. He was in the NFL, coached at Wisconsin, and then like teams that have historically had really good defenses, but particularly also on the secondary side as well. So I think that, like I said, this team is, I think, a little bit more, a little bit deeper in the secondary, both at the corner. I say both at the corner, the nickel, and the safety position. So let's kind of start with we can start with the cornerbacks and then kind of move our way forward. So I think Woody Washington comes in as a bona fide starter, probably your best cornerback in this room this year. So he's a guy that probably has he'll be, I say probably, it would be an extreme shocker if he's not one of your starting cornerbacks coming into the year. Now the other side is a little bit interesting, and to see where Oklahoma goes. They've got a pair of transfers in CJ Colden and Connie Walker from. Colden comes in from Wyoming, who has got a lot of experience, played a lot for Wyoming. He's fifth-year senior. He's coming in for his last year, and then Connie Walker is just he's a second-year guy. Only played last year at Louisville. So I think Connie Walker's a guy that has that turned a lot of heads in the spring, played really, really well. And then you've got Colden, who has just come in here in the summer. So see how that goes as he kind of gets accustomed to the defense and things like that. I think, Mark, probably your leader in the clubhouse, at least early on, is DJ Graham, kind of related to how much he's played last year and a little bit the year before. But I think the thing that you look at, he had by far his worst game as a Sooner against Oregon in the bowl game last year. Got beat several times on deep balls, and how does that play into his confidence as he goes forward? So him, and then there's a couple of other kids, Josh Eaton and Kendall Dennis. Josh Eaton is a guy that Venables has talked about in detail a little bit as he's walked through some of the guys there at Big 12 Media Day, as a guy that was really kind of, I think Venables put it as a silly guy. So a guy that didn't really necessarily take everything seriously, was good in spurts, but he didn't have the the dedication or the kind of the seriousness in what he needs to do, to hone in and get better and improve at his craft every day, every practice, every game, and things like that. So I think this will be there'll be competition on both sides, but certainly would be shocked if anyone unseats Woody Washington. But I think you've got 4 or 5 guys on the other side that you'll see a lot of competition on, and see who's that best guy, and how do you solidify what that depth looks like. And then then we move on to the safety position. I think there's going to be, I think, more of the competition for me, at least right now, and coming into fall camp here, is what does the depth look like? I think your 2 safeties to start the year, as it projects right now, unless other people make moves, Billy Bowman is going to be one of your safeties, and then obviously Key Lawrence is your other. I think it was a little bit of a struggle for Bowman last year, because unfortunately for him, he got moved around quite a bit. He started at nickel, he moved over to some other safety positions, then he moved over to corner, and so it was a little bit of a struggle. For him, obviously, as a true freshman, but not only that, but really just being moved and having to learning new positions. Venables has come out and said he's a safety. That's where he's going to be. We're not going to move him. This is where he's going to be. So he'll as of right now, he'll be your free safety with Key Lawrence being your strong safety. But you look at some of the depth there. You've got Justin Broyles, who kind of looks like he's a little bit of a in-betweener. Could be a safety, could be a nickelback for Oklahoma. Probably like him more in the nickelback perspective. Justin Harrington's another kid that's very very interesting. I think he's got a lot of notoriety. Never got on the field, went into the transfer portal, then decided to come back. And again, like, I think this shows the quality of the human being that Harrington is, because with Venables you don't get. I mean, we've talked about this from a recruiting perspective, but same thing here. A guy goes into the portal. It's typically not a guy that Venables is willing to bring back, but early on in this, and kind of middle of the spring, he had some conversations with some kids, and decided to bring him back. So he's had a fantastic summer from what I've heard, and so he'll be in the mix there at the safety position, maybe nickelback, in terms of what that looks like. And then we talked about Justin Broyles. Jaden Davis a little bit could factor into that nickel position. I think you've got I think the one that's really, really interesting to me to watch out for from a depth is Jordan Mukes. He's a guy that came in, played sparingly last year out of Choctaw, Oklahoma. Last year, Oklahoma unveiled what they show as their elite program last night, where they they did official weigh-ins and made it very, very fun for the kids. And that kid has put on tons of muscle from last year to this year, and so I think he's physically ready to be that. But I think it'll be interesting to see where he's able to kind of make some moves from a safety perspective. And then we've talked about nickelback. Justin Harrington will be in the mix there. Broyles will be in the mix. You've got a couple of freshmen that not sure how ready they are, but athletically, I think they're ready. Jaden Rowe from Tulsa Union is one of the fastest players on the team. He stands 6'4", 6'5", so will be interesting to see how he gets involved. Gentry Williams is an Oklahoma kid as well. We'll look to see how they how they get ingrained in the defense as well. But as we stand right now, I would say that you've got 3 of the 5 starters fairly entrenched right now. One of the cornerback spots being Woody Washington, and then you got your your safety tandem with Key Lawrence and Billy Bowman, and then you've got some serious competition at the nickelback, and then certainly the other cornerback spots. So, but I think overall this is a group that's much deeper than they have been in the past. But at the end of the day, they're going to have to play. They're going to have to play a lot better than they have in the past and more consistently, and I think they will this year. But with one of the concerns being pass rush on the defensive line, and if they're able to get to the quarterback at the same degree than maybe they were last year or last couple of years, how long can that secondary hold up? So that'll be something to keep your eye on as camp goes forward for Oklahoma.
Jason Ray, Last Word on College Football. Get on over there to Last Word on College Football. Check out Jason's work, and of course, lock it in here at the Voice of College Football, Oklahoma. If you're not subscribed, you need to understand that when you're not subscribed and don't have the bell turned on for the notifications, you miss specials like 2 editions that Jason produced this week, which he went live with Q&A sessions, recruiting updates twice this week. And therefore, you got to subscribe and hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. And it's typically, or about 90% of the time, here on Friday at 12:30 Eastern, 11:30 a.m. where it counts. But at the same time, we've got schedules to coordinate. So sometimes we've got to deviate from that and adjust the schedule. So please subscribe, hit that bell for the notifications. Please like the video. that helps the YouTube algorithm and pushes this out into YouTube traffic. All right, we've got a number of comments and questions coming in on the secondary. So we'll start with the most general, and then we will work it back from there. So we've got Long Schlong 69 asks, will Oklahoma have better safety play this year? They've had safeties playing multiple positions, with Pat Fields being the only constant, and now he's gone.
Yeah, I think you're going to have much better safety play this year. I mean, I think Key Lawrence is a guy that's, again, he was moved he was moved around because of injury and just, not great play, but he was, your safety for a large majority of the year. Then he moved to cornerback. And so, I think another year, and then specifically in the system, another year of experience will get him there. And the same thing with Bowman. Both of these kids being solidified in one position, working that position in the spring, and certainly through fall camp as well, is going to be, I think, paramount to their success. But yeah, I think they're going to be, much better. Both of these guys are a pretty significant improvement from an athletic perspective over Pat Fields. Yeah, I know Pat Fields has played a lot, but he's a kid that was incredibly intelligent, a great player at the University of Oklahoma, but athletically and talent wise, he wasn't quite what Oklahoma needed. But I think you got some talent upgrades and what they're able to do there. And so I mean, I think you see a lot of improvement out of Key Lawrence. I think the thing with Billy Bowman is he's still a young kid. He's still he played his first year last year as a true freshman. But you look at him and you'll see him improve, obviously, but maybe not not as much as people want to see early on. But I think it'll be a big year just to see how much he's improved from year one to year two, and more more consistently playing that same position, and how much that helps.
So you've generally addressed this, but do you have a good feel for who's going to win the nickel and the two cornerback jobs?
So I would say Woody Washington right now for one cornerback. The other one, I don't know. It's Mark. It's going to be it's such a battle. I would almost lean towards Connie Walker, just the way that he played in the spring, everything that he's done in the summer, and look there. But that's not. That's just kind of based on how things kind of progressed from the spring. DJ Graham didn't play a lot in the spring game. I don't remember. Maybe he didn't even play at all. But I think he's probably got the most talent, but I think Connie Walker is a little bit more, I wouldn't say more athletic, but, he packs a little bit more of a punch, a little bit of a bigger kid, weight wise. So I would say that one, but that one's really wide open. And I think I would say right now you've got a two-way battle for the nickel spot with Justin Broyles and with Justin Harrington. I think you've got Jaden Davis in the mix a little bit, but I don't think that he'll provide depth, absolutely, but I don't think he's your starter. I would probably lean towards Justin Broyles at this point, just based on how he has continued to progress and played well last year for Oklahoma. But Justin Harrington's gonna make a big. I think he's gonna make a big move here.
Yeah, and that plays right into the next comment with Robert saying Harrington at nickel smothers tight ends. All reports point to this. People in the know.
No, he's absolutely. I think he got such a late start in spring. Came middle of the way, maybe kind of towards the end of spring. So he had a little bit of a catching up to do. But I think from all signs that I've heard, very similar to this, that he's had just an outstanding summer, and we'll see how it transitions to the fall camp here.
Then also, of course, when a team goes to 4 wide, how many corners are you going to have on the field? And that's quite often This is not 1975 where there's 2 wide receivers on the field and you got your 2 corners on each side of the field. And also you see a lot of teams that will want to keep their corners fresh. Plus they'll also not have a clear-cut number 2 corner where they'll have maybe, as in a situation with Oklahoma, several guys that are close that they really want to see in game action and may rotate to a certain extent. And I got to think that unless somebody really separates themselves, that we're going to see a number of corners on the field, especially through the first few weeks.
No, excuse me. No, you're absolutely right, Mark. I think, and the thing about Venables is we talked about he's very, very multiple in his looks. So we'll see some nickel, we'll see some dime packages as well, to your point, where you see more defensive backs, in the rotation, on the field. And so, and we haven't really even talked a ton about this cheetah position that Venables has. So that brings another DB on the field. So yeah, you're going to see a lot of these kids, even if they're not starting, a lot of these play in the rotation as well.
We've got an Ohio State show coming up at 2 o'clock Eastern time on the Ohio State channel. So please check that out again at 2 p.m. Eastern time in just about 35 minutes. Long schlong, good to see that you're locked in. All right. Awesome. Appreciate that. Ron, good to see you as well. Going back to the recruiting, this crossed my mind while you were running down the various targets and commitment dates and everything that's going down at this point. And Oklahoma, of course, had a banner month of July. Wasn't there a lot of speculation that this program would take a hit in recruiting with the transition of Lincoln Riley to Brent Venables? And then there was just this, I can't really necessarily pin down where I heard this, whether this was coming from fans or I saw this out there somewhere, because I certainly didn't have an opinion on it because I didn't know. I wanted to see it play out. That Brent Venables would not recruit on Lincoln Riley's level, that this program was going to take some type of a minor hit, not tumble out of sight, but that it just wouldn't be as strong in recruiting. And it seems that maybe the recruiting is even better. I know the jury's still out and the class has yet to be signed.
Yeah, Mark, I think there's been the narrative in a couple of different ways. One is just kind of play on the field. Number two, obviously our 1A, 1B is recruiting. And so I think the play on the field is, I think there's the assumption that this Oklahoma offense is going to take a little bit of a step back and, go down in terms of the quality of the play on the offensive side of the ball. So I think, and then from a recruiting perspective, I think the narrative was really more so, okay, Oklahoma was a dynamite offensive recruiting. They got tons of, great players at the skill positions on the offensive side of the ball under Riley, but maybe the defense lagged behind a little bit in recruiting. So number one, I think there was the assumption that, hey, this might look the same, but just on the opposite side. Venables will be a really good recruiter on the defensive side of the ball, but maybe not quite as much, excuse me, offensively. And so I think what compounded that a little bit is OU's kind of lack of success, so to speak, early on. I think holistically, I know this was always the design, and this has been Venables' design, year in and year out at Clemson, is, that they typically will get more. They don't do a whole lot early, but they'll get more of these commitments and things like that. And, in July and August and later on in the year. So I think those things kind of compounded. Mark kind of took that to that new level. But I think by and large right now, I think they've answered they've answered those questions right. So when you look at the offensive side of the ball, they've got Jackson Arnold, 5-star, number 16 overall player in the country. Jaquays Pettaway, 4-star, number 55 nationally, number 9 ranked wide receiver. You got Caden Green, offensive tackle, the highest ranked offensive lineman that Oklahoma has got under Bill Bedenbaugh. And then so when you look at those, they've got a couple of really highly rated running backs as well. And so, they've got 3 running backs in the top 50, just top 50 running backs in the country. So I think when you look at this, I think a lot of people underestimate the recruiting abilities of DeMarco Murray, of Cale Gundy, of Jeff Levy, of Bill Bedenbaugh. And so I think Oklahoma's knocked it out of the water. Brent Venables and staff has knocked it out of the water. And then you're seeing what you kind of expected, maybe not necessarily day one or year one in terms of recruiting on the defensive side of the ball. But here's a prime example of, and I saw this, I don't remember, or I give credit to where I saw this, but and it might have been Parker, something I was listening to from him. He said since they've really been measuring it, the most Oklahoma has got in a single recruiting class is 3 top 100 overall kids in one single. Right now, I don't know how many they have right now, but if I could look at this. Let's see, they've got 4. I think they've got 4 right now, 4 or 5 top 100 players overall. But some of these kids, and Makari Vickers, and Peyton Bowen, and Jacoby Johnson, and Jordan Raynaud, and Tasuli Akana, if they get these guys, and not only when you think of DJ Hicks as well, if they get these guys, Oklahoma's going to have anywhere between 10 and 11 top 100 guys, and they've only gotten 3 at any other time. So, yeah, I think the narrative that Oklahoma's recruiting was not going to was not going to be as good under Venables is, obviously it's not holding water, and I think. Excuse me. And I think overall, Mark, I think it's a little bit, especially on the defensive side, it's a little bit silly just to think that the recruiting is going to go down. He was, one of the best, obviously, defensive coordinators in the country for years and years and years, but one of the best recruiters at that level. And you've got him, and you've got Bates, who is just an outstanding defensive line coach, and maybe even a better recruiter. And then you've got the dynamic that this staff has. So, we'll see how things obviously play out on the field in terms of what this season looks like for Oklahoma versus last year under Lincoln Riley, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. But I think they're very clearly the mantra or the chip on the shoulder that these guys have on both sides of the ball. I think the offensive guys are very, they hear that, and part of their motivation has been to prove to everyone, maybe not necessarily themselves, but just to everyone outside in the country, that hey, this is a team that can be really, really good offensively without Lincoln Riley. And I think defensively, heard this a little bit in the media availability on Tuesday, was that they're sick and tired of being the reason that Oklahoma is not winning championships. And so I think they've got that motivation there, knowing that they feel historically and internally like they're the reason why, as a group overall, not individually, but they're the reason why this team hasn't really taken that next step. So we'll see how that goes. In year one, I think it's a lot. And certainly we'll get to predictions at some point here in the next few weeks. But it's the challenge is, how do you get a 40% new roster to come together and play well, as a cohesive unit. on both sides of the ball. But I think they've got the coaching, they've got the guys there that I think they like, and a team that can certainly challenge for a championship this year. Maybe not nationally, but obviously at the conference level.
Tim, good to see you. Our USC fan, Tim, who typically stirs up the chat a bit. Jason had addressed this earlier. I don't want to put words in Jason's mouth, but basically Jason ran down the number of targets, the guys that are in play over the next several months for OU, and with the number 6 recruiting class right now, just felt that if they get their fair share, especially of a number that are leaning Oklahoma, appear to be headed toward Norman, that it could be a top 5 class and maybe top 3 to 4.
Yeah, no, you're right, Mark, and I do think this has the opportunity to be top 3. If Oklahoma gets Hicks, I think yes, this is a top 3 class. But the guys that I just laid out there a few minutes ago, I think are all right now leaning Oklahoma. Some are very, very heavy leans, and some are slight leans. The 3 announcements that are coming in. That are coming in the month of August with, as you look at Jacoby Johnson, Makari Vickers, and Anthony Evans. I think all 3 of those are 4 stars. All 3 of those are very, very highly likely Oklahoma. And then as you go forward, you've got DJ Hicks, which is a 5-star. You got Jordan Raynaud at the defensive lineman, who's another 4-star. Tasuli Akana, edge guy out of Utah, is a 4-star. And then if they're able to flip, Peyton Bowen, Ryan Yates, again, a couple of 4 stars. So, yeah, I mean, if all of those things fall into place, top 3, I think, if they miss out on a couple, you're still probably looking top 5. Worst case scenario, I think this will be a top 10 class. But I think they're somewhere in the 4 to 5 neighborhood right now.
To put a cap on our secondary conversation, I don't know if Jason's got another poll under his sleeve there for the secondary, but this is looking back at our last position unit review, which was linebacker. And so that's where the poll stands right now. We've got who will be the most productive linebacker for OU this season, and 879 votes in. We appreciate that, with Danny Stutzman with a huge lead over the field, Jason.
Yeah, again, not incredibly surprising. I think he's coming into camp. They looks like Danny Stutzman is probably that guy that could jump up and be the best linebacker, on this team. A little bit surprised with Agwebu being 19%, but he has made a significant change to his body to get him into a position where he needs to be. So wouldn't be surprised, kind of coming in. I would maybe just from experience lean on Deshaun White just a little bit, but I think all of these besides Jaren Koenig is going to be counted on to play a very significant role in this defense at the linebacker position. So I think it'll be very, very interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, David Agwebu is another guy that's kind of showed flashes, but has never really consistently been the guy that they need him to be.
It's not too late to take part in our polls. So the linebacker poll that you just saw was the latest posted to the community page. So if you go to the front of the YouTube channel, Voice of College Football Oklahoma, where you are right now, go to the community tab and you will see, or maybe there's various ways in which you receive those notifications. I don't know. But if you want to go back in history, you go to the community page and we've got all of the various polls listed there all the way back to quarterback. And those are still wide open to be voted on if you would like to take part there. And also keep in mind, we've got a Discord that you can sign up for at patreon.com. Search MarkRogersTV, talk Oklahoma football and college football all the time, just like you do in the live chat right here. But you can do it all the time. I get you the link to Discord. All right, Ron Brown's got a question. Others have questions. We appreciate you being here, and we will catch up with those next week, but we've run out of time. So thanks for being here. Jason, is there anything at last word on college football that you'd like to highlight?
We just threw out our preseason way too early. Heisman rankings last early on this week, and I think in the next week or so we'll start getting some fall camp notes out there as well to do that. So a lot of good things to come.
Ohio State Buckeyes live at 2 o'clock Eastern time, just about 20 minutes away. Head on over to the Ohio State channel. Whether you like the Buckeyes or not, there's college football talk over there as well. So jump on in. Jason, have a great weekend. We appreciate you making this happen again.
Absolutely. You do the same, Mark.